So I watch time travel shows, superhero shows, all sorts of crazy movies. Now I'm watching one with robot cowboys, and you know what drives me the most nuts? The money. Oh man, the money. Finances, for some reason, just drive me up the wall when it comes to these types of shows. Welcome to the heart of the stories we tell. My name is Rob, and tonight I will be reviewing Westworld Episode 4. And as usual, I'm enjoying the show. It's still playing with an interesting set of themes. What is a choice? Is it your choice, or are you just playing off what is a mechanical reaction to other people's choices? It comes down to the Pinocchio theory. Are there any strings on you? And then there's what is good and evil. At the end of the day, does the fact that it's a game matter? I'm going to talk about my RPG history again for a minute before we get into the actual episode specifics. So when you get really deep into role-playing games and you start to really look at what you can and can't do, when you can do anything, one of the questions that comes up is what should you do? How much of it is interacting with who you really are and how much of it is putting on a role? Now, I used Grand Theft Auto as an example in the first episode of letting loose and letting go with some bad feelings, and there's nothing the matter with playing a black hat every now and again. In fact, it's kind of liberating, I'll tell you from personal experience. However, all of that is still disconnected. It's a video game, it's an electronic interface, it's some dice and a piece of paper. At the end of the day, it's not as realistic as this. The closer to realism you get, the more disassociated you get, the more the violence piles up on your psyche. This is one of the reasons why, when you get a group of people together in an MMO, or you get a bunch of people together playing paper and dice, or you get a bunch of people together playing on a computer, it's just not the same as the LARPs. See, these LARPs, you have to actually see the person. You have to relate to the person, not the system. And at moments like that, it's much easier to bring everyone together. In fact, it's kind of funny. Playing Vampire the Masquerade on paper and dice, purely as paper and dice, was always easier to screw over other people because they were just characters. But when you go to a LARP and there's all these people around and everyone's really walking around and talking, it's much harder to disassociate yourself. In fact, that's what the title of the episode is all about, dissonance theory. However, for now, let me throw up my two warnings, because point blank, we're going to talk about some really messed up stuff here, and we're going to talk about spoilers. So once again, it's stop, spoiler time. So I was torn as to which was more important to talk about, what happened inside Westworld or what happened outside Westworld. But I'm going to start inside, and here's why. Because it was definitely most of the episode. So Dolores, William, and Logan are off and running, and they're on their bounty hunter mission, and pretty much happens in that. However, we do find out that Logan and William work for a company, and most likely William is about to marry into some important member of that company's family, and that they are supporting and financing Westworld. So that's going to come up later on, I'm sure. The fact is that the finances behind Westworld are going to play a big role. However, the part that really amazes me is the fact that we saw parts out of Westworld where they were talking to Dolores about these things, intermixed with it, showcasing the fact that there is something to this whole time out of sync thing. Now, we also find out that there is important missions, ones that even Logan wants to run, and now we're about to see what that is. So, strap in, that's going to be interesting. So now let's transition to simultaneously the worst and best player in the game, the Man in Black. Obviously, we find out that outside of the game, he runs some sort of foundation that helps people. However, what we've also found out is that he isn't quite as skilled at this game as we had once thought. Not only was finding that town an amazement to him, hey, I've never been here, but now we find out there are whole missions he's never run. And yeah, they seem like what he calls paint-by-number missions. And I want to step back out for a second into the RPG analogy to talk about that. When people design modules for other groups to play, they need to, whether it be paper and dice, LARP, or a computer game, they need to put limits on it. You need to be able to sit there and say, hey, you need to do X in order to do Y, in order to do Z, in order to keep the game flowing, in order to help the person running the game understand what the path is that you're on. When you're making one up on your own, normally you're allowed to make it a little more freeform. In storytelling games, the difference is called railroading, when things are very much A, B, C, and sandbox, when you can just travel around. Up till now, I've assumed that the Westworld was very much a sandbox with a few railroads in it, and what the Man in Black is doing is complaining about those railroads. Now, remember when he said he didn't have time for paint by numbers? What he means is, alright, in order to get to the princess, first we have to get this magic sword. In order to get the magic sword, we need to collect these 3 pendants. You might recognize this analogy. Now, in a video game, that makes perfect sense. You want the PC, the person playing the game, to run through the 3 dungeons to get the pendants, and then the dungeon to get the sword, and then go fight the bad guy and get the princess. And then maybe there's a twist where the princess gets sent to Dark World, but now I'm going too far into this analogy. So, he doesn't want to do that. He wants to run around and just have fun and do his own thing, and find his own storylines. And that's actually a cool type of player, one that I'd like to play with. More and more, he seems like the type of guy that if he weren't so nasty, would be fun to play with. My hat's off to the writer who came up with that exploding cigar gag, because you know what? That was ingenious. And in Black's hunt for the maze, we now have yet a little more character development. And we have the albino gunslinger with the snake tattoo. And again, I liked all of that. I liked her and the bandito and how they play off each other, and I liked the whole idea of why she has that tattoo. The only thing that bugs me is we know that the idea of this new character, of Wyatt, came up recently, so I don't know how it is that he could possibly be tied into the Maze storyline, but when we get to Out of Westworld stuff, we'll talk about that. Now, the end sequence in Westworld, the prostitute and the bandito, now that really blew my mind. Have you ever heard of an alien abduction story? Because doesn't it feel like that's what they're doing? Telling the equivalent of an alien abduction story? Imagine how crazy you would go if you saw things, and those things didn't make sense in the real world. We have religious experiences, we have alien abductions, we have stories of faith, kidnapping people. All of it is because something unexplained happened, and someone tried to rationalize it. Now look at it from the host's point of view. The world is wrong. In fact, Dolores even says it. Either something's wrong with this world or something's wrong with me. Have you ever had that feeling? I know I have. Mostly dealing with this election. But either way, this is still just one of those crazy moments where the analogy is way too easy to draw. There are some versions of the Joker from Batman comics that they rationalize that he isn't just insane, but he's super sane. He's so sane that he knows that none of it is real, that it's just a comic book and he's playing a role. And once he realizes that none of it's real, that none of it matters, then he can just have all the fun he wants. And take a look at that last scene with them kissing. And then think about that scene with Alfred talking about Joker in the second Batman movie. Some people just want to watch the world burn. Now, we truly haven't seen outside of Westworld to see what year it is, to see what the world is like. But between Bernard, Teresa, and Ford, boy, do we have some idea of just how much politicking is going on in the back rooms. The fact that they all seem to have their own division and be answering to each other, but not answering to each other. In fact, my question is, Ford, as Anthony Hopkins, how much pull does he really have? And how much does he really know? I mean, that was pretty scary knowledge, especially when he pulled on Teresa that, no, this is the table I sat at. No, this is exactly everything is under my control. I am God here and people will see it. It was probably the most frightening I've seen of the Ford character yet. I'm sure there's going to be a point where we are going to look back at that conversation at that little place inside Westworld between Teresa and Ford and say that if we knew right now what we're going to know by the end of the season, maybe the beginning of next season, that not only would that make more sense, but we'd see lots of things foreshadowed and hidden in there. But hey, that's just my opinion. What did you guys catch? For now, what I'm going to ask you to do is to like, subscribe, and share this video so that we can build a community and try to find a way to figure out all of these little Easter eggs before they pop up. For now, I hope you have a good night, and thank you for walking with me through the heart of the stories we tell.